13 days into this war, Iran just did something nobody in Washington was prepared for. The country that the Trump administration said had no functioning government, no coherent leadership, and no ability to sustain a prolonged conflict just issued a formal address from its new Supreme Leader. Mojtaba Khamenei spoke to the world for the first time since his father was killed in an Israeli airstrike on February 28th. And he did not ask for peace. He vowed to keep the Strait of Hormuz closed. He vowed to continue attacking every American military base in the region. And he told the Iranian people directly that their martyrs will be avenged. That is where this war stands on day 13. The speech matters not just for what it said, but for what its very existence destroys. The entire strategic premise of Operation Epic Fury was built on the assumption that killing Ali Khamenei would shatter the Islamic Republic from the inside, remove the head and the body falls. That was the CIA assessment. That was the blueprint. The assassination of the Supreme Leader would trigger a political vacuum so severe that the IRGC would fracture, the government would collapse. And within weeks, a new Iran would emerge, one that would negotiate on American terms. 13 days later, Iran has a new Supreme Leader. He has made his first public address. The IRGC stands behind him, and the war has just escalated. To understand how completely the original plan is unraveled, you need to go back to the 4 days before the first bomb fell. On February 27th, Oman's foreign minister Badr al-Busaidi told the world that a breakthrough had been reached in nuclear negotiations. Iran had agreed to never stockpile enriched uranium. It had agreed to full verification by the International Atomic Energy Agency. It had agreed to irreversibly downgrade its existing enriched uranium stockpile. Al-Busaidi said peace was, in his words, within reach. The following morning, the bombs started falling. Whatever Iran had agreed to on February 27th, the United States and Israel had already decided that diplomacy was not the path they were taking. Operation Epic Fury began on February 28th with nearly 900 strikes in 12 hours. Ali Khamenei was killed. Dozens of other senior Iranian officials were killed. And in a strike near Bandar Abbas, a missile hit a girls' school in Minab. At least 165 children and teachers were killed. That single event has embedded itself into the international record of this war in a way the Trump administration cannot control, and has become the specific grievance that Iran's new supreme leader referenced by name in his first address to the nation. From the moment the strikes began, the Iranian government did not collapse. It adapted. The 84-member Assembly of Experts, which is the body responsible for selecting Iran's next supreme leader, was bombed by Israel on March 3rd while its members were in a preliminary meeting to begin the selection process. Members were killed. The process continued anyway. By March 8th, a new supreme leader had been selected. Mojtaba Khamenei, the 56-year-old son of the killed Ayatollah, consolidated support within the Revolutionary Guard. Senior IRGC commanders pledged loyalty, and Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi, who has been one of the most publicly visible officials throughout this entire war, appeared in front of cameras and said plainly that negotiating with the United States would not be on the table. His reasoning was specific. He pointed out that indirect nuclear talks were underway last June when the U.S. attacked Iran. Negotiations had resumed in February 2026 when the U.S. attacked again. From Tehran's perspective, the pattern is not ambiguous. Every time Iran enters negotiations with Washington, the bombs follow. On March 10th, Trump told reporters that the war was, in his words, pretty much complete. He claimed Iran had no functioning navy, no air force, no radar. Hours later, Iran launched what its state media described as its most intense operation since the beginning of the war. firing some of its most advanced ballistic missiles toward Tel Aviv and Haifa simultaneously. The IRGC said it conducted the operation jointly with Hezbollah. Hezbollah launched its largest rocket attack against Israel since the war began on that same day. The International Revolutionary Guard Corps spokesperson Ali Mohammed Naini told Iranian state media that Iran, not the United States, would determine when the war ends. Iran's armed forces spokesman Sardar Shekarchi called Trump publicly the delusional president. The maritime situation in the Strait of Hormuz is now the central pressure point of this conflict, and it is escalating rather than stabilizing. Iran has effectively put a chokehold on the strait, which carries approximately 20% of the world's oil supply. U.S. Central Command confirmed on March 11 that it had destroyed 16 Iranian mine layers along with multiple naval vessels near the waterway. Iranian tankers carrying oil to China have continued moving through the strait. Commercial shipping from Western-aligned countries has largely stopped. On March 12th, 2 oil tankers were hit in Iraqi territorial waters near the southern port area of Basra. It was the first oil-related strike reported in Iraq's waters since the war began, and it marks a significant geographic expansion of where Iranian strikes are being directed. Iraq shut down oil port operations following the attacks. 1 person was killed, 38 crew members were rescued. Search operations continued for others. Trump himself has intensified warnings about the strait situation. When CNN reported that Iran had begun laying sea mines in the waterway, Trump posted that if Iran had put out any mines, he wanted them removed immediately. This was the same day as Energy Secretary Chris Wright posted on social media claiming the U.S. Navy had successfully escorted an oil tanker through Hormuz, then deleted the post. Iran's foreign minister called it fake news. The Navy has not officially confirmed any successful commercial escort through the strait since the war began. Meanwhile, the International Energy Agency convened an emergency agreement in which member countries unanimously agreed to release 400 million barrels of oil from strategic reserves, with the United States contributing 172 million barrels from its strategic petroleum reserve starting next week. The releases failed to drive down the price of Brent crude oil, which is back above $100 a barrel as of Thursday. The human cost of this war now runs across multiple countries simultaneously. According to Iran's UN representative Amir Saeed Irabani, at least 1,348 civilians have been killed and over 17,000 injured inside Iran since February 28th. UNICEF reported this week that the situation for children is catastrophic, with more than 1,100 children reported injured or killed. In Lebanon, 634 people have been killed. 12 people have been killed in Israel. 7 American soldiers have died and 8 have been seriously wounded, mainly from attacks on U.S. bases in countries neighboring Iran, according to Pentagon figures. Those U.S. casualties are significant not because of their absolute number, but because of their location. American soldiers are dying on bases in Kuwait, in Jordan, in Saudi Arabia, countries that did not choose to enter this war and whose governments explicitly asked the United States not to launch it from their territory. The Gulf states hosting American military infrastructure are absorbing consequences they were not consulted about. Qatar, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, the UAE. Iranian drones struck a residential building in Kuwait, wounding 2 people after debris from intercepted drones damaged 6 electricity transmission lines. Bahraini authorities arrested 4 citizens this week on charges of spying for Iran's Revolutionary Guard. Smoke was reported rising over Bahrain's capital Manama following an Iranian drone strike on the fuel storage facility at Bahrain International Airport. Saudi Arabia's Ministry of Defense confirmed Thursday that two drones heading toward the Sheba oil field were intercepted over the empty Quarter Desert. Explosions were reported at Dubai International Airport. Blasts were heard in Abu Dhabi. Qatar Airways received temporary government authorization to operate 29 flights after operations had been suspended. The Qatari Prime Minister praised the unity of his citizens and promised to keep daily life undisrupted. That is a statement that requires a lot of work to remain true. Al Jazeera's analysis this week framed the central question the Gulf is now grappling with directly. Have American military bases in the region become part of the security problem they were designed to solve? The bases were built to deter Iran and protect American allies. They are now functioning as targeting coordinates. The countries that house them are being struck precisely because they house them. The calculation that Gulf governments are making about their own security in a post-war Middle East is being made right now in real time under fire. Dubai and Doha were built on the expectation that regional stability would attract global investment. That model is under direct pressure. Foreign investors are already questioning the region's investment safety. Airlines have rerouted or grounded flights. The economic architecture of the Gulf, developed over 20 years, is being stress tested in ways it was never designed to handle. Iran's president, Masoud Pezeshkian, laid out 3 specific conditions for ending the war this week: recognition of Iran's legitimate rights, payment of reparations for the U.S.-Israeli assault, and firm international guarantees against any future attacks. These are not surrender terms. They are the terms of a government that believes time and economic pressure are working in its favor. The Iranian leadership's read of the situation is straightforward. Every day, the Strait of Hormuz stays effectively closed. Every day, oil trades above $100. Every day, American allies in the Gulf absorb missile and drone strikes on their energy infrastructure. The pressure on Washington to find an exit intensifies. Iran also struck this week in a domain that is not military and not maritime. A hacker group called Handala, which Iran linked, announced it had crippled the networks of medical device company Stryker and stolen 50 terabytes of data. The group said the operation was direct retaliation for the Minab school bombing. This matters because it signals the breadth of Iran's response strategy: kinetic strikes on Gulf energy infrastructure, maritime operations against commercial shipping, cyber attacks on American corporate targets, Hezbollah rocket barrages on northern Israel, Iran-backed militia operations in Iraq. Each domain is a separate pressure point. Together, they construct a picture of a conflict that is not trending toward a quick resolution. Trump's public statements this week have been contradictory in ways that reveal genuine uncertainty about the path forward. On Monday, he said the war was very complete. At a press conference the same day, he said the U.S. was achieving major strides toward completing military objectives. At a separate event with Republican lawmakers in Miami, he said the U.S. had already won in many ways, but had not won enough, and that it would go forward more determined than ever to achieve ultimate victory. These are 3 different statements about the same war made within the same 24-hour window. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said this week the Pentagon was giving Trump maximum options and that the war would not be endless. Iran's new supreme leader, in his first address, said Iran would take vengeance and the strait stays closed. Those 2 statements define the gap that no negotiating channel has yet closed. The U.S. National Intelligence Council report obtained by the Washington Post this week found that a large-scale American-led assault on Iran was unlikely to topple the country's government. The same report described the prospect of Iran's fragmented opposition taking control of the country as unlikely. That is the government's own intelligence apparatus. 13 days into a war that was launched on the assumption that regime change was achievable within weeks, stating formally that the assumption was wrong. The assessment is not that the war has failed yet. It is that the original objective, the stated reason for launching the most ambitious American military operation in the Middle East since 2003, is not going to be achieved by military force. What Mojtaba Khamenei said on day 13 of this war in his first address as Iran's new supreme leader was the answer to every question Washington was hoping would not be answered this way. He did not ask for a way out. He did not signal a government in collapse. He did not speak like a leader preparing to negotiate under duress. He spoke like a leader who believes his country is still in this fight, who believes the costs being imposed on American allies are working, who believes the Strait of Hormuz is a lever that time makes more powerful, not less. And the oil price above $100, the tankers on fire in Iraqi waters, the IEA emergency release that changed nothing, and the 7 American soldiers buried since this war began, all of it is evidence that the lever is working. Whether the next step in this war is more American strikes or the beginning of a genuine exit conversation, it will happen in the shadow of that first address. The new Supreme Leader has spoken. And what he said was not what Washington needed to hear.